Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Civil Disobedience TV. I'm your host, George Donnelly. This is Martin Luther King Day, and of course, we're celebrating a right by disobeying unjust laws and interviewing the very fine individuals, the good people who disobey these unjust laws. People like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the people who follow in their footsteps. And I'm here with Catherine Bleich from Texas. Hello, Catherine. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I'm
It's,
pretty excited.
it's my pleasure. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Do you consider yourself an activist?
Yeah, I do consider myself an activist. I'm very actively pursuing my goals toward freedom and liberty, both for myself and my community. I'm involved with several projects. Operation Defuse is probably the most recent project I've been involved with, exposing DHS fusion centers to
Mm-hmm.
activists and citizens across the country.
Excellent. Yeah, I've read a little bit about that. You are kind of a pioneer in that way, in the way that you expose that. Isn't that right?
Well, I wouldn't say I was necessarily the one who exposed it, but I was an instrumental part in the pushback against the MIAC report. I heard about it through the Alex Jones show and I called and confirmed it. But the tactics we utilized in Missouri were very unique. We put pressure on chambers of commerces across the state. People from across the country called in and said, "We will not travel to Missouri." So we really put pressure on their pocketbook. We also hand delivered every single state representative, state senator, and the governor a copy of America Freedom to Fascism, which is one of the DVDs that was listed in the MIAC report as potential, paraphernalia and indicate to law enforcement you might be dealing with a radical militia member. So we gave one of those to every single state rep, every state senator, the governor, along with a copy of all the news coverage that the report had received. And we walked in with video cameras and were not afraid to confront our elected officials when they did not respond to us in a respectful manner, as we saw fit as citizens of Missouri at the time. So, yes, we used very unique ways to push back.
Excellent. You know, if only more people would stand up like you have, this would be an entirely different culture.
I
So,
think people are standing up.
yeah, excellent. So, tell us, what unjust law or illegitimate authority have you disobeyed?
Well, there were two instances, both of them. Actually, there's been more than two instances, but two of them resulted in my arrest. The first one, where I felt really empowered and I did not end up spending any time in jail, was in St. Louis when the driver of a vehicle I was in got pulled over for a warrant at a traffic stop, and I was videotaping the arrest. And the arresting officer told another female officer to pull her out of the car. And I was pulled out of the vehicle backwards while videotaping, and this female cop took my camera, and I took it back. I didn't just stand there and let her take my property. I took it back and explained to her how constitutionally she had no authority to A, be touching me, B, be taking my things. And that de escalated the situation. So that was very empowering. And it felt really good for me to walk away from that with my camera, with my possessions, and not having been, assaulted in any way more than being yanked out of the vehicle. And I think that's because of the video cameras, for sure. Second time was when an officer at the court date for that same incident, we were standing in line in court, waiting for the traffic court to begin. It'd been like 45 minutes, and an officer came out and started telling people to line up against the wall, which I thought was silly. And I made a comment: get in line, show us your papers, give us your money. Welcome to the new America. I didn't even say it to him. But he heard me. He didn't like it. He asked me to repeat myself, asked me if I wanted to go to jail. I said, "No, sir. Constitution, First Amendment, why on earth?" And he said, "You have 2 minutes to leave or I'm going to arrest you." And I said, "For what, sir? If you give me a legitimate reason to leave, I will." And he did not. Back down. He came out 2 minutes later and arrested me. And
Oh,
thankfully, 10 witnesses signed that they saw it happen. And I got an apology letter from the chief of police. So,
nice.
yeah.
So how did it make you feel when this this gentleman or whoever he was when he arrested you just for speaking?
It was horrifying. I was not expecting that to happen. It was the last thing I was planning on doing that evening, that's for sure, spending a night in jail. It was humiliating. It was degrading. I was furious with the 40 or so people standing out there that watched it happen and did nothing to protect me, except for one girl. One girl stood up to try and protect me, and she had a taser pointed at her chest.
Oh.
And it was absolutely horrifying and frightening. But I didn't stop talking about the Constitution the entire time. I didn't stop talking about Oath Keepers. A couple officers came and wrote down some of the websites I was talking about. And because of the conversations I had with women in jail, most of them were black. I was the only white woman in there. And they told me stories of being arrested while walking home from work at night. You know, they worked fast food. They were walking home. They didn't have an ID. And so now here they were sitting in jail. And I asked them what they would like, what would help them feel more empowered. And they said they'd like to learn their rights. So we put on a Constitution class in that town for those people. And I think that's part of the reason I got an apology letter, because that's a lot of pressure on a little small town.
Oh, wow. But very nice. That is impressive.
Thanks. It was exhausting and not very fun. And I don't want to go through it again.
I bet. It's not fun to go to jail.
No, it's not.
So, the first time that you did this, when you were recording the police who stopped you, did you struggle with the decision to record them, or did that decision come easily to you?
No, that was a defense mechanism for myself. I felt uncomfortable, and so I wanted to videotape and document what was going on, because I've seen all the videos of police brutality in recent history, and I wanted to make sure if anything was going to happen that it would be documented. And thankfully, the camera, I think, did prevent violence from happening, because she couldn't get the camera to turn off. And so even though she had aggressed upon me by grabbing me and pulling me out of the vehicle, it was caught on tape. And she figured that out real quick.
Nice. So, how did the police officer react when you took when you wouldn't let go of your camera?
She was in shock and very confused, and she said, "You don't have to be so difficult." And I was like, "I'm not being difficult. You're taking my property from me. Just don't touch me and we'll be okay." And it sort of, we stood there for a second looking at each other and de-escalated. And that was great.
Wow. That's excellent. And that's probably pretty rare. I mean, I was arrested last May by some marshals out in Allentown, and I held on to my camera, and they had just the opposite reaction. They attacked me harder.
Well, it was a female police officer, so maybe, we're about the same size. Maybe she didn't feel tough or something,
Yeah.
I don't But they do use those fear tactics, and that's what's really frustrating for me, is that even during my MIAC activism, when we would be trying to get an appointment with our governor of Missouri, they would bring in armed law enforcement to intimidate us or escort us out of the state capitol for simply requesting a meeting with our governor, which was extremely frustrating. And there've been, I'm sure John will probably talk about our traffic stop in New Orleans, where we had a successful run-in with the police too, where we said no. I don't know if you were planning on talking to him about that or not. I can get into it if you want, or you can talk to John about it. It's up to you.
Oh, up to you. Yeah. No, I don't have anything pre-planned for John.
Well, his story is really interesting, so maybe I'll just touch on the New Orleans one real briefly. The Operation Defuse team was in New Orleans last spring, late winter, early spring. We were there for the National Fusion Center conference. We had just spent 3 days rubbing elbows with directors of fusion centers, DHS agents, FBI agents from all over the country, all in one place. Mm-hmm. And we were driving to a poetry jam to celebrate. And we got pulled over because a headlight was out. And the officer tried to ID everyone in the car. And when it got to myself and our fellow passenger, Ben Weir, we both said no. And that really upset them. They were very confused. They said, "We need you to get out of the vehicle." "I'm not comfortable with that, sir. I'm not going to get out of the vehicle. If you can give me a reason, constitutionally show you my ID, I will. But at this juncture, it's my understanding I live in these United States where papers, please is not an option." So they brought
Mm-hmm.
in 4 police cars. Now we were videotaping with 3 cameras on the inside, one on the outside, because someone from our caravan stopped and got out of the vehicle. And they were walking up, looking at our vehicle with flashlights, kept asking us to get out, and we stood our ground. And thankfully, the officer walked back to his car with all of his buddies while John was reading him the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. So
Nice.
even though they brought in all their reinforcements and tried to find a way to intimidate us out of the vehicle or to hand over our IDs, we stood our ground, and thankfully nobody got hurt.
Wow. Nice. So, are you do you dislike all laws or only some? And how do you decide which ones to obey and which to disobey?
I believe in consensual government. So if I am not willing to consent to some rule arbitrarily inflicted upon me, I'm not going to. I believe in the non aggression principle, and I believe in taking care of my fellow human beings. So I'm going to live my life morally. And at this point, I don't see the law having much relevance to morality or living a life based on the non aggression principle. So, were I living in a society where I made the choice to voluntarily consent to certain laws, I would, of course, abide by those laws and be willing to pay the consequence of breaking those rules. But at this juncture, I don't believe that I live in a situation where I have given consent to anybody to use force against me for not behaving the way they think I ought to behave. So I don't have problems with all laws, just ones that are forced upon me or I'm manipulated or coerced into some way abiding by. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's freedom, and I'm not going to participate.
Nicely said. Very nicely said. So, have you been criticized by any friends or family as a result of your civil disobedience?
Of course, there's been a lot of criticism, even from within our own movement. But thankfully, I have put in a lot of time and effort to try and be consistent with my actions and my words and to publicly evolve. When I mess up, I'm willing to say I messed up. If I shouldn't have behaved in a certain way or I learned something along the way, I'm willing to talk about that. And so a lot of the criticisms and people who have been really unkind to me initially, I have been receiving maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later, apologies from the people who are close in my life, which I really do appreciate. And I'm grateful that there are, relationships that are strong enough to make it through something like that, where people maybe initially judge you, but when they take the time to really sit down and listen and understand where you're coming from, to forgive you and to accept your apology for the things that you feel maybe you didn't do well and to accept who you are as a person no matter what their judgment of your actions are. And I feel blessed to have people like that all around me, which is great.
That's excellent. So some people say that the law is the law. It's the law. It's on the books, and if that's the case, then we have to obey all those laws, whether we like them or not, whether they're just or not. What do you say to that point of view?
I would say show me a police department or an elected body of officials that abide by all the laws, and maybe I'll consider hearing you out. When the people who are writing the laws and enforcing the laws don't obey them themselves, when Tim Geithner doesn't pay taxes yet gets appointed to the federal level in such a way as he was earlier this year, I mean, it's a joke. And so if people say the law's the law and you should just obey them, may your chains rest lightly upon your shoulders, as John likes to say so frequently. Um, Good luck.
Nicely said. So we have a couple questions here. A G Rizzle in the chat room. He wants to know how are you keeping how are you guys in Texas keeping the activism going? It seems like a lot of people burn out fairly quickly.
yes, burnout is a issue, I think, that is very prevalent in our movement. Down here in Texas, the beautiful thing that I have found, which is why I moved down here, is the community. There really is a strong, growing, vibrant community. And when there's conflict, they're willing to sit down and discuss the conflict and come to a resolution that doesn't involve the dramatics that I think were initially found when a lot of us found each other during the Ron Paul campaign. A lot of that sort of behavior has sort of been pushed out of the movement here in Texas, at least from what I've seen. People are coming to realize that if they just simply say, I'm not going to work with people who are unkind to others or who don't abide by the non-aggression principle, people either shape up or they leave. So I think the community aspect is the most important thing because, where does burnout come from? It comes from working long, hard hours and not feeling like you're appreciated. It comes from having a hard time keeping the lights on and just getting exhausted from the day in and the day out and the grind that comes with this. But when you have friends who understand and who will kick back and enjoy just living with you, and who are not so focused only on the political, but are also working on building this right here, building the individual and building relationships. That's really important. And I think there's a lot of that down here in Texas. That's what was a big draw for me. And I think that's why their movement is growing instead of shrinking, because their ability to relate with each other in a kind, loving way is growing and is improving and is evolving. Whereas in some communities, you see that deteriorating, and that's going to contribute to burnout. That's going to contribute to people just throwing their hands up and giving up. So for me, it's the community aspect. When times become tough, there's always someone there to swoop me up. It's great.
Very perceptive answer. Yeah, I've noticed. It's a basic human thing that even comes before liberty. Just the culture, of being, mutual aid, mutual support, friendship, love, and you've really hit it with that comment. Another question from Curtis of Porkfest fame. He wants to know, are you ready to defend your Soapbox Idol title at Porkfest this year?
Not only am I ready to defend my Soapbox Idol title at Porkfest this year, but I'm going to put some money on winning again. So take that, Curtis. See John over there.
That's excellent. So, Kat, I want to thank you very much. This is a great conversation. I think we had a great interview here. And before we go, do you want to plug any of your projects?
Sure, I'll do that really quick. First of all, operationdefuse.com. That's where you can go to learn about the activities that we're engaging in, as well as about the actual police state itself and how it works and things you can do to combat the growing tyranny in your local community. Grassrootsheadlines.com is a personal project of mine. It is auto-generated content from all of the moving and grooving activist groups across the country that I'm impressed with. So it's generated through RSS technology. So in one place, you can find the recent updates from Free Keene, from Liberty Restoration Project, from Tag Texas, from all these different fantastic groups. And that's grassrootsheadlines.com. And in conjunction with that is alphabetsoupnews.com, which is a website that uses the same RSS technology to auto-populate the DHS, FBI, DOJ, CIA website RSS feed, so you can keep track on them as well.
That's excellent, Kat. Well, thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay,
Peace.
bye-bye.